Okay, so Tuesday we started talking about this unit, so you should have all of the blanks filled in between Monday and yesterday. So Tuesday we started talking about this. We ended on talking about the types of growth and the types of line graphs that you will see depending on your two types of growth. So we talked about exponential growth and we talked about logistic growth. So exponential growth, remember, maybe looks like this. So you start out with a very gradual growth increase, and then at a certain point, your increase starts to become more dramatic. That is because your numbers start doubling, because those are your exponents. Your exponents start doubling, so your numbers start doubling. So everything is getting bigger at a faster rate. So this is your exponential growth. This is usually how bacteria grows. They grow very rapidly after a certain point, so they have exponential growth. This will also be seen in the wild or in the real world if you have unlimited resources. So if you have an unlimited amount of food, an unlimited amount of space, you don't really have that many predators around, then you could see this example of growth. You could see exponential growth. But usually what you will see is you will see logistic growth or logarithmic growth. But anyway, this is logistic growth. So what logistic growth is usually going to be a more gradual increase. And then what you're going to do is your real world wild situation is going to feel the effects of different limiting factors on the environment. So you're going to have only a limited amount of food. You're going to have a limited amount of space. You're going to have predators around. So all of these things are going to start to decrease your growth. And then at a certain point, which is called your carrying capacity, that is where you have reached the limit. You have reached the maximum number of individuals that this environment can hold and survive. Okay? So at your carrying capacity, then your population growth starts to plateau or level off. Okay? So this is logistic growth. You have an increase until your environment starts to not be able to provide for all the individuals in it. Okay? So that's what you see more often in the wild situations. Wild populations. All right. So again, you have limiting factors. So what things are going to limit? Yes, sir. Yes. So what things are going to limit or control your population growth? Those are space, disease, availability of food, and then I would also add on to your notes the predators. The presence of predators is always going to affect your population growth. So space, again, how much space? It is a limited number. So after a certain amount of individuals, there's only so much space that those individuals can fit into. Disease, the more individuals you have in an area, the more likely disease is going to be a contributing factor. And so that disease is going to limit how many offspring can survive, how many individuals can survive. Availability of food, you have a specific amount of food available in one area. So once that food is all gone, then no more individuals are going to be able to survive because there's no food for that individual. And then I want you to add on here presence of predators. That is also going to limit your population growth. If you have predators around in the area, then you are not going to have very many individuals surviving. And then we had our carrying capacity that we talked about. So we have our logistic growth here, shown here on this graph. We are counting the number of organisms on this side, and we're looking at how long it takes for those organisms to grow. So we're looking at the number of days down here, number of organisms on this side. So this is showing us after so many days, we have our population growth, and then after a certain amount of time has passed, once we have all these individuals in this environment, the environment is going to start presenting those limiting factors. So the food is going to start running out. the space is going to start running out. Your predators are going to start becoming more of a nuisance. And then your disease is going to start increasing. So all of these factors are going to start decreasing your population growth enough to where at this certain point, which is called your carrying capacity, that is how much or how many individuals this environment can hold. So for this example, for this situation, our carrying capacity is at this line, which hits this number. So our carrying capacity for this organism in this situation is 200 in this environment. Okay, so our carrying capacity is 200 individuals in this environment for this situation. So that's what carrying capacity is. All right, so you have different things, different factors that are affecting your population growth. You also, or more specifically, you have a difference between density-dependent factors and density-independent factors. Density-dependent factors are going to be factors that are dependent on the density of that population that you are looking at. So how many individuals do you have in this area? And then according to whatever number that is, you could see more of these factors either playing a role, a bigger role or a smaller role, depending on how many individuals you have in this population. So first one is competition. So individuals within a population are going to naturally compete against each other for resources. Okay, you have a limited amount of food, a limited amount of space. All of those individuals want that food in that space. So they're going to naturally compete against each other. Well, if you have a smaller amount of individuals, if you have a fewer amount of individuals, then you're not going to need that much competition because those resources are going to be more available to that small number. But if you have a large number of individuals, those resources are not going to be readily available to everyone. And so you're going to have more competition if you have more individuals. Parasitism. So parasitism is densely dependent because, or it's dependent on the density because usually when you have more individuals, you have a higher percentage of those individuals being affected by a parasite. It's just how it goes when you have a lot of individuals in one common area. Usually parasites are going to be more commonly found if they're all really close to each other and you have a lot of them in one area. Okay. Conversely, if you have a small number of individuals who are more spread out, then the possibility of all those individuals having the same parasite is greatly decreased. So it just goes with your density. If you have more individuals, then you have a higher chance of parasites being in those individuals. That goes along with disease. So usually disease, you have a higher risk of disease when you have a higher number of individuals. So if you have a lot of individuals that are really close together, you're going to have more disease. So think of coronavirus, right? So we have all these people all in this one small area. You're going to have more frequent diseases, especially if those diseases are easily transmitted from person to person or individual to individual. So a higher density population is just going to bring in more disease. And then lastly, predation. So if you have a higher density of individuals, especially if those individuals are prey items. So let's think about a herd of antelope. So let's say our herd of antelope is very, very big. There's a lot of antelope. So our lion species are going to see there is a lot of antelope here, which means I have a greater chance of succeeding in a hunt because there are more individuals to hunt. Whereas if our antelope population is very small, then I might not have that good of a chance of hunting and being successful in my hunt if there's only 5 of them compared to 20 of them. Because in that group of 20, there's more of a chance that one of them may be less likely to survive a hunt. Whereas if I have 5 of them, those 5 may all be very well adapted to resisting predation. Okay? So these are all density dependent factors. These are all things that are going to depend on how many individuals you have in the population. How is the number of individuals affecting your population growth? So that's density dependent. And then you have density independent. So these factors are going to be factors that are not dependent. So independent means not dependent. So these factors are going to be not dependent on how many individuals are in the population. So these are more of your abiotic factors, whereas your density dependent factors are more your biotic factors. So these are your abiotic factors. You have fire, weather, temperature, precipitation. So any of these are going to happen no matter what. Whether you have 10 people or 10 individuals in a population, or if you have 10,000. It doesn't matter how many of that individual you have, these things are still going to happen. So you could still have wildfire. You could still have other natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, flash floods, tsunamis, any one of these things. These could still happen, and if they do happen, then that's going to change your population growth. Temperatures. Usually your environments are going to stick between a certain range of temperatures. But if that range goes outside of the normal range, so if you have either extremely high or extremely low temperatures, then those populations, those species, may not be able to survive. So that's going to affect your population growth. But again, that doesn't depend on how many individuals are in that population. The temperature is going to fluctuate no matter what. It may fluctuate more or less, but it's going to fluctuate. And then finally, precipitation. So if you are in your rainy season and you, for some reason, have a higher amount of rain this year, so you have more flooding, that flooding is not dependent on how many individuals are in that population. But that is going to affect the population growth of that population. Okay? So these are density independent factors. These are your abiotic factors that are going to happen no matter what. But how are they going to, when they happen, how are they going to affect your population growth? Okay. This slide, this PowerPoint does include an assignment about the Dust Bowl, but we are not going to do that. I don't think we have enough time, unfortunately. So all of the slides, I'm not sure if they're in your notes or not, but all of the slides pertaining to the Dust Bowl assignment, we are not going to do. So this slide, this one, this one, this one, this one, those slides. All those slides we are not going to worry about. So we're going to jump to this slide where it talks about species interactions in the community. So we have in communities, so our community is our level that deals with all of our different populations of our different species. So now we're going to look at how those different species are going to interact with each other and what kind of relationships are they going to form with each other because they live in the same area. So this overall study of the relationships between multiple species is called interspecific competition or interspecies competition because they live in the same area and that area has a limited amount of resources. So how are they going to compete with each other in order to consume that limited amount of resource? So you have a rhino, an antelope, and a zebra. They all live in the same area, the Africa savanna. They all live in this grassland area, and they're all herbivores, so they're all going to eat grass. Okay? But what happens, especially if there is a drought, or when there is a drought, because a drought usually does happen in this area. So when there is a drought, how do these different species interact with each other and compete with each other for that food source? Especially if that food source is greatly diminishing because there's no more water. Okay? So that is interspecific competition or interspecies competition. But you have the competition between multiple species within a community. So yes. So some other interactions that we have between species. One of them being one that you are very familiar with, which is called predation. So predation is the relationship between prey and predators. So predators are going to hunt and kill and eat other animals. Those other animals are known as prey. Okay. So this relationship we kind of looked at when we talked about evolution, because we talked about during evolution you could have prey and predators evolving together in order to be better at being the whatever they are. So predators are going to evolve to become better predators. Prey are going to evolve to become better prey. So predators are going to have adaptations that are going to allow them to be better predators. So they're going to be able to run faster. They're going to be able to be more agile. They're going to be able to be stronger to hunt down other animals. Also, prey are going to have adaptations and they're going to evolve in order to become better prey. So they're going to have adaptations for camouflage. They're going to have adaptations to allow them to run even faster. They're going to have adaptations that are going to help them not get eaten by predators. Okay. So there's one interaction. Another type of interaction has a few different examples. So the overall interaction, the overall relationship is called symbiosis. And symbiosis is a relationship between two organisms where they're either one is living inside the other one, or one is living on top of, literally physically on top of the other one. Okay? So you have three different examples of symbiosis, and it's the relationship between the two where they're living in the same vicinity. So either one is inside the other one, or they're pretty much living on top of each other. So we have parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. So parasitism is a parasite. So this is where one individual is going to benefit. That is going to be the parasite is going to benefit. And the other one is harmed. Either the other one is harmed in a way that is fatal, so that host is not going to survive, or the other one is harmed not as bad, but maybe weakened. If someone has music on, please turn off the music while I'm teaching. You should be listening to me, not music. So parasitism is one is benefiting, so the parasite is benefiting from this relationship. It is getting food and nutrients from the host, and the host is being affected negatively. Okay, so either the host is going to die, or the host is just going to be weakened. Mutualism is another example. Mutualism is where they both are going to benefit. So you have, for this example, you have us as humans and bacteria in our gut. So all of you should have heard on commercials the buzzwords, the fad of your gut, and you have good bacteria in your gut, and you need to have good gut health to be healthy. So yes, you do have good bacteria in your stomach, and those bacteria are going to help you break down the food that you eat, and it's going to help you just retain those nutrients more. And the bacteria are also going to get nutrients from you breaking down that food. So that is a mutualistic relationship. So both of the things are going to benefit. And then finally we have commensalism. So commensalism is that one benefits and the other one does not get any, doesn't really get anything from the relationship. So they're not harmed, but they're also not benefiting from it. So they have no bad, no good. They're just there. So a lot of times what you'll have for commensalism is oceanic species will usually give birth to their young in seaweed beds. So that provides a great protection for those offspring. But the seaweed itself is not getting any kind of benefit from having babies being born in it. Okay? So that would be commensalism. So what I want you to do is I want you to look up here, because a lot of you are not looking up here. And I want you to look at these three pictures, and I want you to tell me, what are these example of? So what is this an example of?
Symbiosis.
Which symbiosis? This is an example of commensalism, because clownfish are living in an anemone, but an anemone is not getting any benefit from the clownfish. The clownfish is getting a home to live in and protection from predators, but the anemone is not getting anything from the clownfish. What is this an example of? That is parasitism, because this is, the mosquito is benefiting from eating or sucking up the blood, but mosquitoes are known to give diseases. So the disease is going to weaken or maybe even fatally harm the host. And then, so what is this an example of? That is mutualism, because what is the butterfly getting from the plant? Pollen, nectar, food. And what is the plant getting from the butterfly? Pollination. So the butterfly is going to go from one plant to another, and it's going to help this plant pollinate, which is going to allow it to make more offspring. So this is mutualism, this is parasitism, this is commensalism. Yes, ma'am. I'll have to look into that. So if that's the case, then we'll pick another example. I'll look into that, because I think I have heard that as well. Yes, sir. Isn't that move? Yeah, they kind of just they just float around and get nutrients from the ocean. All right. So here's another question for you guys. So over time, the climate of an island became drier, which resulted in changes to the populations of various island finch species. Finch populations with a certain beak shape thrived, while those not having that beak shape decreased. Which of the following describes a necessary condition for these changes in the finch population to occur? So basically, what is happening that is going to allow the beak shape to either thrive or not thrive? What is happening? So A, fewer mutations. B, limited food resources. C, limited beak variations. Or D, overproduction of offspring. So what do you think? B? Any other options? I heard A. Okay. Let's see. It is B. So your limited food resources. So your island is becoming drier. So you usually have one or two options for food. One, you have nuts and seeds, which are a drier material, a harder material, or you have insects and fruit. So you have these different types of food. But your insects and your fruit are going to need a lot more water. In order to make fruit, you need water. And in order for insects to survive, those insects need water. So fruit and insects are going to require a lot more water. Your nuts and your seeds don't require as much water. So if your island is becoming drier, what type of food are you going to have more available? Your drier food is going to be more available. So your nuts and your seeds are going to be more available, and your fruits and your insects are not going to be as available as if you had a good amount of rain. Okay? So if you have more nuts and seeds available, which of these two beaks structures are going to be able to survive better? The top one is going to survive more, because this beak structure is meant to open very tough, hard nuts and seeds. So these birds are going to be fine. This bird, however, this beak is meant to eat insects or to get into fruit. So these birds are not going to survive as well as these birds, because these birds are experiencing limited food resources, because they can either eat insects or fruit. But if there's no water to help those insects and fruit be produced, then all of their food source is going to go bye-bye. So they're not going to survive because they have limited food resources. So what is happening to change the shape of their beak? the food is changing. So their beak is going to change. Now, that could be an example of a mutation, but the mutation itself is not affecting the beak shape. It's the food available that is affecting the beak shape. Limited beak variations. Yes, you could have limited beak variations. For example, we only have 2 here. But is this bird surviving more because there's only 2 different types of beaks? No, this bird is surviving more because the food resources are different. There's not that much food for this bird, so this bird is not going to survive. That has nothing to do with how many beak structures there are, how many different beak structures there are. And then D, overproduction of offspring. So overproduction of offspring, usually if you have this, then they're going to eat a lot more food. But is that what's happening? Is that why there's not that much food available? No, you don't have that much food available because your climate is changing. So that's why it's B. Everyone understand that? Any questions on that? Okay. All right. So what we have next is ecological succession. So ecological succession is basically the progression of plant life that is going to form in an area. So you either have 1 or 2 different types of succession. Your first one is your primary succession. Primary succession is when you have an environment that has never ever before seen plant life. So this is usually if you have new islands showing up, they have never grown plants before, that soil has never seen a plant in its life. So this is primary succession. So what's going to happen is at the very beginning stages of this new island, you're going to have very small plants, so very small grasses, things called lichens. You're going to have very small mosses. And then over an extended amount of time, so over a very long period of time, those very small grasses are going to be replaced by bigger grasses. Those bigger grasses are going to be replaced by shrubs and small trees. And those small trees and shrubs are going to be replaced by larger trees and denser forests. So this primary succession is if the environment has never ever before seen plant life ever. Okay? So this is the primary or the first time that this environment has seen plant life. The other type is secondary succession. Secondary succession is if an environment has seen plant life before. So this is going to be either the second or third or fourth time that this environment has had plant life. So secondary succession is usually going to occur after a natural disaster, so a wildfire, maybe a tornado came and ripped everything off the ground, stuff like that. So any natural disaster afterwards, if you have any plant growth afterwards, this environment has seen plant life before, so this would be secondary succession. Also, after human involvement. So if we go and we rip out all of the vegetation because we're either mining or we are taking down trees for paper, logging, that kind of stuff. So if we take out all the trees, and then when we're done with the land and we come back and we plant more trees behind us, that would be an example of secondary succession because that is the second time that that area has seen plant life. Okay? So primary succession is it has never before seen plants. Secondary succession is it has seen plants before. Okay? All right. Yes, sir. Yes. So before we leave today, I want to start talking about the flow of energy in an ecosystem. So last unit, the end of last unit, we talked about our nutrient cycles. So we had our water cycle, our carbon cycle, our nitrogen cycle, and our phosphorus cycle. And we looked at how those individual elements, how those nutrients are cycled through the environment. So now we need to look at, well, how is energy itself cycled through the environment? Because energy is also going to be cycled just like our elements, just like our nutrients. So 2 factors that are playing a role in the cycling of energy are autotrophs and heterotrophs. And you may have already heard these words. So just to recap, autotrophs are producers. They are going to produce energy. These are going to be your plants and any kind of photosynthetic algae, but usually it's plants. So plants are going to produce what? What's our major product of photosynthesis? Oxygen and glucose. So glucose, they're going to produce oxygen and glucose, and when they produce that, it is also, they're going to produce energy. So energy is stored in the chemical bonds of that glucose. So when they produce glucose, they are also producing energy. Heterotrophs are also known as consumers, and they are going to consume other things, and that's how they're going to get their energy. So plants produce energy, consumers are going to eat that energy. So again, the energy is stored in the chemical bonds of the glucose. So when you break those bonds, when we decompose, when we break down those bonds, when we eat those plants, we break those bonds, energy is being released. We harness that energy and we turn it into something else. So you have autotrophs and heterotrophs. You have producers and you have consumers. So producers, you usually only have one type of producer. It's usually a plant, some kind of plant material. That is your producer. That's what's going to produce your energy. Your consumers, however, you can have multiple types of consumers based on what they consume. What do they eat? So if they strictly eat plants, they are called herbivores. So only plants, nothing else, just plants. If they only eat other animals, or if they only eat meat, then they are known as carnivores. Strictly only other animals. If they eat both animals and plants, they are called omnivores. That's what we are. If they don't necessarily eat other things, but they decompose other things, so they're going to decompose organic material, so either animal waste or an animal corpse after it dies. So if it's decomposing, if it's breaking down, it's still going to consume that energy, but it's not going to actually physically eat that thing. It's just going to break it down and then it's going to absorb or consume that energy. That is called a decomposer. That is usually your fungi. Okay? And then lastly, you have detritus. That's how you say this word, is detritus. Detritus. These are organisms that are going to find the waste of other animals, and they're going to eat the waste of other animals, and that is how they're going to get their nutrients and their energy. Okay? So beetles, earthworms, termites, they're going to eat the waste products of other animals, and that's how they're going to get their nutrients and their food and their energy. Okay? Okay, that's where we stopped today, so that's where I'm going to stop with you guys, and we'll finish the rest tomorrow. Or we'll get more done tomorrow.
Why that picture?